So, guys, I want to talk about a tough video, and it's actually one that, is actually kind of like, really important to my life because it's about the time that I got bit by a dog as a kid. And a lot of that is about, like, personal accountability. And it also is very reflective of, like how parenting style has changed because, I was really happy that both my parents really just enforce personal accountability for my bad choice because a lot of times when kids are bit or hurt and they ultimately make a dumb decision, you know nowadays there's a lot more sympathy for the child. There's a lot more people saying, oh, well, fuck that animal, or to hell with that animal, and whatever, really. And you need to kind of hold your children responsible, or else they go through life making a bunch of bad decisions and putting themselves in bad situations and never really learning. Like, you need to send your children off with a powerful message. And I do thank my parents for how they handled this. So throughout my life, I've had a bunch of dogs. I remember, like, I think when we were adopted, my dad had a dog named Zach, and then he had a dog named Randy, and then later on we had a dog named Taylor. I really loved Taylor, but we gave her up because my parents moved to New York City. And then we had a dog named Bailey, and my parents had two schnauzers named Max and Rudy's. I always loved those dogs. I love those two dogs the most because Max would always bust my father's balls, really, just by always just barking and just being an opinionated. It was really funny. But this was like the dog Randy. So there's a couple of things that happened here. That I remember my dad telling me a story that when he had Zach, that Zach was an older dog, and what would happen is that the dog would kind of like really really snap a lot. So what would happen is that me and my older brother would be both be standing on like tables or standing on sofas or whatever because the dog would be snapping at us. And it's one of those things too that I see a lot of in parenting and with a lot of different people is that sometimes when they have a dog that's older, they love the dog or they give the dog a lot of chances. And sometimes, if that's like a concurrent thing where, your kid has to be like on a sofa or whatever trying to avoid a dog that's like jumping at it because it's old and crazy and the children are not instigating the dog, it does say, okay, good judgment would always be to euthanize or put down the dog because you can't have relatives in a dangerous situation, really. So I believe that's what happened with that dog. Like, it was almost like because it was showing signs of being dangerous that they had to euthanize that dog, really. But they gave that dog a bunch of chances. But obviously, especially with small children, I think we're like four, or like probably like 4 and 7 or whatever. You can't just have a dog that's just not safe, really. So they made the good decision with that, really. Even though it was, definitely a tough choice. You raise a dog for a long time, you end up euthanizing it, and the primary focus is on Randy. So I remember it was a disturbing experience with Randy because I remember like one day, like me and Kevin, no, me and my father both went down to a dog pound in Albany, New York, and that place honestly looked like a prison. Like, I honestly remember it looking like a subway tunnel or something like that, really. And like there was a bunch of like large fences with dogs, and they're all like barking and whatever. And even though people get excited to bring a dog home, it was a situation where I was kind of like very intimidated and terrified. Like, honestly, it looked like every dog that was barking just wanted to attack us. Like, it honestly made me feel like Jodie Foster in The Silence of the Lambs, really, with how like she passes all the inmates, and some of them are like jumping at her, but they're inside the cage, their confinement and all that. It really just felt like that. So we got Randy, and I think like my entire experience with Randy, this was like probably when I was in like in second grade, so I think I was like 8 years old. I always felt like a little like worried because I was like saying like, first of all, my dad made a very bad choice because I knew at that young age that Dobermans were bad dogs. If you have a child, you'd want to get a golden retriever or another dog that is known for being a good family dog, like Dobermans, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, are known to be like attack great no German shepherds. They're all known to be like attack dogs. So I really think that that was kind of like the first bad choice. You're getting a breed that has a reputation for being an attack dog. And mind you, that my parents, one of the reasons why we were adopted was because they mentioned that we had mental health issues. So ultimately, that was not really a good judgment. And I understand like the psychology of my parents is that sometimes they have the mentality of, I know how to control a situation, I know how to control an animal, I know how to control people, I can figure this thing out really. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And but I really felt that first of all that was like bad judgment really. You have two kids with mental health issues, and you have an issue with like one of us has an issue with crossing boundaries. So getting a Doberman is not really a good idea. The next thing is that I remember one time my dad took me for a walk with the dog. It was like maybe like 8, 9, or 10 at night, and I remember like the dog escaping and running away. And then my dad told me you never ever chase a dog that's trying to get away from you because it thinks it's a game and whatever. But it was another situation where I kind of felt in my head at that age. I was like, okay, this is another situation where my father thinks that that he could handle this dog when really this dog is doing whatever it want really. And I think that throughout my life I always get angry with people who have animals that just do whatever they want really. Like if you like, because I remember like one time like a few years ago I was walking home from the diner, and then there was this like big pit bull that ran out of a house, and I remember jumping in somebody's pickup truck, and the owner just like jumped on top of the pit bull really. Like I felt so angry because I said like, what, if I had like a gun on me, there are people, and it is, some people will have self-defense, or some people would shoot a pit bull if it charges at them, or another large dog. And it was a clear example of that. Like I'm talking about a situation with that pit bull where it was like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like probably 35, 34, 35, and I was mad with the owner. Like I was like saying, what, if I'm thinking about punching this guy in the fucking face, or I don't care that he restrained his dog and whatever, and it looks like he's trying to control his dog, and the dog just freely runs in and out of the house really. So I think that lifelong I always get really angry with people who have dogs and their dogs are not in control really, because there's a lot of people who just have that mentality of, oh well, I can control a dog when the dog's not exhibiting control, and I don't care all the damage that they do. Or sometimes when you watch movies and you see like dogs, you see children have a birthday party, and then you see like a dog run through things and knock things over. Or you see like American Funds videos where you see dogs like steal food, or you see like on other television shows where a dog's running the household really. It always creates an emotion of anger with me, because I think that I got bit by a dog. I think it comes from me being bit by a dog, but I also think it comes from the idea of people are not respecting my safety or the safety of others really, because honestly, animals need to be with owners that are responsible. And I think that one thing that we don't see a lot of in this country, in my opinion, is there's no classes to teach people how to raise an animal, how to discipline an animal, how to control an animal. It's just what, you just get an animal and you go off whatever and you do whatever with it. So I think that it stems from like what happened to me in my childhood, because that dog clearly had signs that it was not a dog that wanted to be controlled. It just wanted to do whatever it wanted to do, really. So, obviously that was a red flag my parents ignored. Then I also remember that my dad told me that, when my grandmother Grandma Carol visited, God rest her soul, she died a few years ago. What happened was that she would sit in a chair and then the dog would nip her, really. And that's also another thing where, again, my dad was like, oh, well, it's cute. Or, oh, well, it's not a big deal, really, So it was like another, just really stupid thing to do. Okay, well, now I have a dog that nips people. Now I have a dog that has like a rebellious spirit. Now I have a dog that is a breed that's known for attacking, really. So it was all just not really good choices, or ignoring red flags, or think to yourself, oh, well, I know how to just be in charge of this dog, really. So what happened was that there was one day that me and my brother were watching Looney Tunes, and in the old episodes of Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny would do something like he would grab like his enemy, and he would give the enemy like a really really large smooch. And my brother did that to the dog a bunch of times, and the dog would growl, and he would do that. So I remember like one day I did the exact same thing, and then I ended up getting bit by the dog, and I remember freaking out really because it bit my lip, and there was blood, and the dog was barking a lot. And I remember my dad like running from upstairs to downstairs, and I remember like my dad just like having to like like just really pin down that dog and everything like that, and that's all I kind of remember really. Unfortunately, I've seen some animal abuse and some harsh discipline on dogs by relatives. And I don't remember if it was, and I don't remember like exactly who'd really, but it was not in that situation because there are people that would just who are strong like my father and would just like destroy that dog, but it was not that. It was not the situation really. So my dad took me to the hospital. I had to like get stitches for that. I remember like when I was younger, I always hated this, but sometimes when you get like a stitches, they give you like this mega band-aid that's like covering most of your face. I remember like when I was in high school that I had like a wart removed from the back of my ear. I remember like they had like this band-aid that was like super super large, like like as if you had like a big gash on you. So I walked out of it pretty well really because I'm still pretty. But the thing about it was that also too. I was talking to Jacqueline. I think her name is Jacqueline Durand or something like that. Like the woman in Texas that got bit over 800 times by a dog. Really, there's a lot of times when that just doesn't end well. So I was lucky one bite and it was over really. But I was also lucky that my father responded and subdued it because that could have ended way worse. But I remember like having a big fear of dogs for a long time really, and I think that the other things I remember about that day was yes, I did get surgery. Yes, my dad had my brother like be babysit by my grandparents um, while they attended to me. And then the other thing was that I remember my brother being put in punishment because when I explained the story to him, my dad was mad at my older brother. I was like 8. My brother had to be like 10 or 11 really. So he was mad at him for inspiring me to do that, like not setting a good example really. I remember one time when I was a teenager that it was just the exact same thing really. Like I remember like I think I was either using like profanity around my younger brother, or I remember like swimming really deep into water really, and my younger brother's trying to imitate me, and my dad just yelled at me to stop doing that because my younger brother was trying to imitate my behavior, even though I was doing something safe and something that wasn't good. So my brother got punished for being a bad role model. So I remember like my older brother like saying that he wished that I was euthanized instead of the dog really, and I never told my father that, but I know like my dad would punish him for 2 or 3 weeks, but that hurt me really deeply as a kid really. And like I've said about me and my brother, we were adopted out in an abuse and neglect situation, and our parents were like really really strict growing up really. So I can kind of understand him just having a lot of feelings for being like what, he wasn't the person who made the exact choice to like put his to kiss the dog or whatever, and get bit really. So it's almost like because I got bit, I created that situation that day. Like how should he be held accountable? That's probably his mentality really. But that's also kind of why you have to do the family matters thing and talk to your children about why they're being disciplined. So I think that should have been that really. I remember like going through life being afraid of dogs, and other things are just not like going over to parties or whatever with my parents or dinner parties because there would always be like a large dog or a dog that would be jumping and going crazy really. Like I remember like one time there was a dinner party my dad went to, there was a dog that would always be barking, or if you watch Rugrats, the dog would go crazy because it would see like Spike the dog on television. But I always kind of had a fear or an anger inside of me because I was kind of like, what, I just hate people. I think it more comes from hating dogs because I had a hate for dogs for a long time. Like dogs need to be put in their place really. Like I don't like watching videos of dogs out of control, or like, or even like movies where like the dog is like doing, like dogs are doing like behavior like destroying parties, or you watch like some videos online of like dogs like being strong enough to like push over refrigerators and eat everything, or just you have like a birthday party and the dog's like eating everything or destroying things. Like that always made me angry growing up, and I think it comes from that feeling of a fear of being overpowered by dogs, and I also think it comes from a fear of irresponsible owners, and also just owners that are a little like unaware of the danger. Because I've been told my everybody, like one personality type I hate is stupid and dangerous. I hate people who do stupid and dangerous things because sometimes they can hurt somebody else really, and they're not really held accountable for their behavior. Like for example, like this morning, I was driving up the hill in my Uber. My brother came speeding down, and also there was like snow covering the front of his windshield. Really, he could have easily caused an accident. He was like maybe not that. It was probably like maybe like a 40% chance of him crashing into my Uber because my brother is like dumb and stubborn really. So I would know that I would want to like put hands on him or whatever if I got into my third car crash because he was being irresponsible really, or like even as I said, that guy that I was telling you guys about a little bit earlier, who when I was walking down from the Three Brothers Diner, a great place in Hamden, Connecticut, that this guy like I was walking by a house, this guy's like a large pit bull bust out of it, and he and that pit bull chases me. I had to jump in a pickup truck, and the guy said, "Dude, like I felt anger toward that guy." Or I had a neighbor a few years ago who was watching a dog, and the dog was misbehaving, so they left the dog in the hallway, and I was like, like I just wanted to like, in my brain, I was like, oh well, I would love to go and kick their asses, or I'd love to call the cops really, or I would have a violent fantasy of, oh well, I'd love to like, like shoot that dog that was in the hallway because the dog was jumping and growling and just like flashing its teeth and whatever, but I kept like snitching on the neighbor, and I kept like reporting that, or you hear a bark or whatever, and I kept reporting that. But this was like 4 or 5 years ago, like because we have no dog policy, and it's like the fuck man, you have a dog, and the fucking dog that you have you're leaving in the hallway because you can't control it, but if it bites somebody else, it's your fucking fault really, and then also. It's not considered assault really because you didn't train the dog to attack somebody, but there's huge like negligence and responsibility really. Like there's kids running around the hallway now where I live really. Imagine that they were around during that situation where like this yellow dog was like was still with my old neighbor and doing all that shit. That's not okay. Or like I lose my mind too when like there's another fucking neighbor who fucking lives here, and it's like this woman, and she has like her boyfriend bring over this large pit bull, and the pit bull like runs around the property, and I've never reported that. I know other people have reported that, but like I remember like one day I was taking out the trash, and you see this large pit bull that's like maybe like 50, 60 pounds, outside, with a big smile or whatever, or like when you're sitting and you're waiting for a car, this pit bull's jumping and hopping on you trying to be friendly. And then the guy says, oh, if you don't like that, I'm going to beat that pit bull's ass. We're like, oh, well, beating a dog. Oh, what happens when you abuse a dog? Really? Either the dog gets scared or afraid of people, or the dog builds up a lot of anger, really. But I remember, like, those are situations that concurrently I've had where I've always had lifelong anger with people who are not in control of animals. Because it kind of it probably stems from what happened to me, where I felt that my dad gave that dog way too many chances, and he was stupid enough to get a Doberman. He should have gotten a golden retriever or another breed that was a lot less dangerous. But obviously every dog is dangerous. You can even have like a Chihuahua or a Schnauzer or another dog that's known for being friendly, and they could bite your kids for doing the exact same stupid thing. And sometimes there's a story that there was like this of two Chihuahuas that fought off a mountain lion to protect a kid, really. So any breed of dog has a level of danger, really. But common sense is that you don't get a Doberman or a dog that's known for aggression when you have children with special needs. And one of your MOs is that you have kids with special needs. And then also the other thing is that if a dog's been exhibiting like, bad behavior or retaliatory behavior, and it was very clear, like that's something you got to be responsible about. So I remember, like, always feeling angry about that, really. And also, and I know this is very hard about me, but I almost became very apathetic to animal abuse. I've seen a bunch of animal abuse growing up. I've seen, like, relatives kick or beat the hell out of their dogs for pooping in the house, really. And in my brain, I had the mentality of, oh, well, justice is served, really. When, now I'm working really hard not to think that way. Abuse is never a way to teach an animal. Or, when, I think it was like, as I said about Jacqueline, the woman that got attacked by a dog, 3 or 4 years ago in Texas, really. I felt so angry because there were video footage of them putting the dogs on leashes. And they also did something where they couldn't really go into the house immediately to save her, and they even like had the dogs in, like, in a kennel, really. These dogs just bit a person over 800 times, and a police officer was holding a shotgun, really. So I understand, they probably didn't want to fire into the house, really, because they didn't want to accidentally hit Jacqueline. But the point of it was, I felt so mad for that. I was like, you know what, I would sue the police department because, you have you have two dogs bite people, but bite somebody over 800 times, and you're more concerned about their safety or whatever, really, instead of, you're more concerned about their safety instead of dispatching them because they cross such a fucking line, really. So I always feel anger towards animals that are out of control or when people show leniency to animals. And I also feel that way too. Like, like I've worked many different jobs. I've worked in psych hospitals, I've worked at other jobs, but I always feel like when somebody is dangerous and when somebody needs to be in control of their behavior, either the person or the person supervising or being in charge of that person, it kind of all stems from that, because from, like, I think my father not having the best judgment. But I also think that the other part of it is accountability. So the accountability side was that I remember, like, after that, I think it was like during the summertime. This happened like in the winter. So during the summertime, my dad was visiting one of his friends, and one of his friends had a cat, and the cat, like, scratched me and drew blood, really. And my dad was frustrated with me because, here we go again, really. And I felt really mad because my father was like, it's your fault. That, we're mad that we can't have a dog. We're mad that we can't have a cat. We're mad that we can't have pets because you keep, picking fights with me. When an animal is being mad at you and showing you signs, it's saying, please leave me alone, really. And I remember that with all that sticking with me because it kind of did two things in my head, really. That one thing, it made me angry to think that my father was just being too harsh with me. And then I think on the other side, it developed, it was one of the things that kind of brought me down a bad road in life, because I learned, in a sense, that maybe there's underreaction when an animal hurts me, but there's overreaction for my behavior. And I've said this before, that I did see a counselor for a couple of years in my 30s, in my 20s and 30s. So when I was bullied at work, when I was almost assaulted at work, when I was sexually harassed at work, he had a mentality of, really, whenever bad things happen to me, I need to work hard, get a better job, not being another black man going to jail. And whenever I've made bad decisions with my life, his mentality was always like to shun that behavior, really. So my therapist also had that mentality of, really, when people do bad to me, he underreacts. But when I do bad things to other people, that's when he has a reaction with my behavior. And even like with that cat, really, it was the same thing. I felt that was an underreaction. A cat just scratched your son, drew blood, and you're more upset with me instigating the cat, really. That's how I felt that time, really. But it also taught me a lesson that I learned later on in life, which is, if you make stupid decisions, you win stupid prizes. And sometimes when kids get attacked by animals, they get a bunch of coddling from their parents. And sometimes, not every situation is the same. And I think a lot of times when you look at dog attack victims or other things like that, a lot of times it is an animal out of control. But there are stories of people abusing animals and animals reasonably retaliating. There are times when you watch, like, Jackass or other shows where an animal is being instigated, or there are attack dogs that are trained to attack people, and you see Johnny Knoxville or Steve-O get attacked by a dog. Or there are situations where how should I kind of say really, where you watch, like, there's this guy like on Instagram, like he was shooting at a dog to teach the dog to like be brave. It's a puppy really, and then what happens is that the mother dog bites him really for shooting at his puppy, like even though there was blanks really. And like even though it was a skit and all that, if anybody saw that, he was doing that in front of his like young son really. So like the kid should be removed, so should the dogs really. But there are a lot of times in our lives really where there are situations where we are responsible, and if we are instigating an animal and the animal attacks really, you have to be just like my father, when you have to be like, okay, you know what, it's my job to like put the band-aid on you, make sure you don't get an infection and everything like that really. But it's also my job to sit down and talk to you and be like, hey man, this can't be a consistent pattern. You have to know to stop instigating animals, because I don't want to see you get hurt again. And also too, yes, my family loves animals. So why should everybody kind of deal with you and your just either inconsiderate behavior or behavior where everybody gets punished, where we can't have an animal because you can't behave yourself. As my father always told me, kids make mistakes, parents pay the price. But part of being a good parent is to say, okay, when that is the situation, we had to punish the kids, and we had to be like Carl Winslow and explain things to kids, and we have to be really deep. But I also think that the lesson that my father gave me that day should have been the conversation that he had to me when the dog got bit. I think it was more like people running around because I had to get surgery and other things like that. Like I got and I always have like a permanent scar like right here and stuff like that. But I was really proud of my father, and just all that. I was really proud of my father because yes, he was right to teach me that when I caused the situation, it was something that I did, and and then I deserved to pay consequences. You make stupid choices, you win stupid prizes. And I think the last part of it is what happened to Randy. Like after that, we had to give the dog away, and that's that. I don't know anything about the future of that dog, but more than likely the dog was euthanized because I think like what I heard this growing up, that when a dog bites somebody and they taste somebody's blood, really, or when a dog bites somebody and there's blood, the dog might automatically think that eating somebody or attacking again or seeing human beings as a food source is what they do really. And then there's repeat attacks or whatever really. So I really just think that so I really think the dog was euthanized. But it was also bad with my family because it kind of became like a family joke really, where it's like, oh well, I got bit for being stupid, like almost like the time my brother was being my older brother was not being careful. He fell down a flight of stairs in Maryland. Like it kind of became like an old family joke really. But I remember like one time my younger brother he wasn't around then, but my younger brother, we adopted him from childbirth. He was born in 1999, but I remember like it was like in 2004 or 5 really. There was like a dinner party or a Christmas party, and my brother wanted to hear about the story really. And I think like it was like another family joke where my dad was like laughing at me and saying, "Oh, it's your fault," and other things like that. We do kind of come from like a weird type of family where I think that that does still it still felt kind of hurtful too, because it's still like he also had some bad judgment in adopting an animal that that had a pattern of aggression and was a breed of aggression. And I also kind of felt that maybe to me that was the hard truth really. But I just think that it comes off as like maybe in a way like I get mad when I heard that, because I think in a way I kind of felt like well, yes, it is the truth. And it is the truth, and it was a foolish thing to do, really. But it was also foolish of him to, have a dog that had a pattern of aggressive behavior, really. But I understand, like, sometimes parents are like that, too, with their kids. Like, they always just want to just jab in accountability. But one thing that I would say was that I was very proud of myself, because I did talk to my younger brother about it, and I said, like, you know what? I don't know what happened to that dog, that dog could have gotten put down or whatever, really. It's not really a funny story. It's really a story. It's really a sad story in a way, really, because I was not being responsible, and more than likely the dog ended up euthanized. But also, as I didn't tell anybody at that table, I could have also attached that, okay, it was also a situation where my father didn't exhibit the best judgment. He had a dog that exhibited aggressive behavior and retaliatory behavior, and he really did nothing with that dog, and said maybe I need to connect the dots with what this dog's doing. And then he had a dog named Zach before that had an issue of being I was snapping at me and my brother really when we were kids really. So there is some accountability on my parents' side for giving a dog way too many chances. There's a lot of people who do that with animals. So there is accountability on their side and lack of judgment. But it's one of those things that I learned in life that just because, somebody had a lapse in judgment doesn't mean I take away from my piece of the pie of accountability, really. And yes, and I also think that, again, nobody knows how my brain thinks. Nobody knows, I don't know how the brain of another person thinks, really. So I really, really just think that another part of it is, I don't see the side of a parent, like, having a dog, then paying money to take care of the dog, and then having to pay money to, take a kid to surgery, and then maybe maybe the parent's an animal lover, and they can't really do that because you can't, like, have a kid, go to school every single day all, like, scared, like, oh, my dad has a dog, I'm afraid this dog's going to attack me, another dog attacked me, oh, well, because then they'll just remove you they'll put you in child protective services. They'll be like, okay, you're not respectful to your kid's mental health, really. Or the other part of it is, it took a long time for my parents to adopt another dog. I think it was like 3 or 4. It was like, it had to be like a few more years before they got like Taylor. And then after that, it took like maybe 5 or 6 years to get like Bailey. And I really think that my parents really just had to consider that a phobia of dogs, really. And I was also really respectful of that. And also they were really respectful of that because there's plenty of people that, if their kid gets attacked by a dog, the next day they're getting like a 4 or 5 German Shepherds, really, because they're like, no, I'm a dog lover, fuck your feelings, and that wasn't my situation, really. But it's definitely an old family story, really. And what I would say is that, yes, when your children get attacked by dogs, if they instigate the dog, if you know the story that they were just being, irresponsible or stupid, it's always good to hold them accountable, and it's always good to kind of explain, okay, if they're at a young age, like 8 or 9, okay, well, what, it's expensive to have a dog, it's expensive to take care of dogs, it's expensive for surgery, it's expensive to use with immunize a dog, and other things like that, really. And that's why, you gotta be more careful, but we have to hold you accountable because you instigated the dog, really. And just because and it doesn't mean that we don't love you or care about you. It means that we have to teach you accountability and not to be a victim, really. I think that I would have kind of, it would have taken me a while to learn that because I'd be like, oh, well, you're just the harshest parent whose kid gets bit by whose kid gets bit by a dog and gets punished afterwards, So that's how I would have felt, really. But I would have had to learn over time that, like what my other father said when I got scratched by the cat, really, which was, stop instigating animals, and it's your fault when you instigate when you do when you do eeny meeny miny mo, catch a tiger by its toe and find out, really. And like I've said, I applaud both my parents for teaching me accountability with that. And I also will say that yes, the other part of it is, obviously when you have animals, you have to think about the breed. You also have to think about what breed and what temperament they have, and then also too, if you have an animal that exhibits consistently bad behavior or a bad temperament or irritable or retaliatory, that is not an animal that should be safe around children. I remember like watching this video where a kid steps on the tail of his cat, really, and then the cat retaliates and starts scratching him and climbing on him, and then his dog starts barking and tells the cat to fuck off, really. That cat, do you think it's appropriate? Like, if I was a police officer, I'll be driving down to that place, and I'll be like, okay, either the kid goes in custody, or we're taking that cat, we're dispatching that, because the cat clearly has an issue of attacking children. It's a very retaliatory personality, really. And you're having a kid in a household where the cat can more than likely get revenge one more time, really. So, just because you love animals, it doesn't mean you give animals so many chances, really. Be more responsible. Or if you have a dog, like, in my situation where I was walking down after a good breakfast, of a dog comes charging at the house and he's about to attack somebody for being on the lawn, No, not for like walking by his lawn or whatever. Really, now if that guy owner had if that was like something that happens consistently with that dog, I would, somebody if somebody calls the cops really, or there's somebody who is a gun owner and they shoot the dog, or the dog, or if like say like some guy and his daughter are walking home, or his son's walking home, and the dog charges out, and the guy has a gun and he's like a gunslinger and shoots the dog. I don't feel that sorry for the dog losing its life really because it's exhibiting dangerous behavior. You don't want your kid to get mauled, or you also have to talk to the owner and be like, hey, maybe this guy shouldn't be having animals because if he gets a dog that's doing that consistently to people, that's not somebody who's responsible. That's not somebody who can control an animal, and he's also having an animal with a dangerous temperament. There are plenty of pit bulls. There are plenty of dogs from other breeds, and there's plenty like cats and whatever from all breeds that are good ones, and then there are ones that are just have that can be controlled but need more discipline, and there are ones that can never be controlled and all that. So it doesn't mean that pit bulls are bad or Dobermans are bad or German shepherds are bad. It just means that what you have to understand, what you have to be in control of your animal really, and ultimately that's one thing. But also if your animal has a bad temperament or a pattern of bad behavior, and you're not doing anything about it, you're not saying, okay, this needs to be fixed or the dog needs to be put down really, then that's on you really. And then the other part of it is that if we have children who do stupid things and then they get attacked by a dog, you have to hold them accountable and not necessarily turn it into a dark comedy or like a family or a funny family story really, like my situation. It's it's something they get to take seriously, and you have to hold them accountable because you teach powerful lessons, and that's kind of the thing with me. And then I also think that the other thing too is then you also should explain to your kids, okay, well look, we had to pay for your surgery, it cost this much, we had to put the dog down really. So instead of that dog living a long life really because you did this, your actions led to the dog being killed really. And then also parents have to be like, okay, well, if my dog had a bad temperament and then that just happened really, it's a mix of the parents' fault for not paying attention to the dog's bad temperament, like my dad with like Randy, nipping at people and being retaliatory and just doing what it wanted. There's accountability on my parents' side, and it doesn't mean I'm tossing off accountability. There's accountability on both sides really. So that's like the dog bite story. I'm something that I've always wanted to talk about, but it's a really important one. You have to hold yourself accountable for what animals you bring, and if your kids are doing something stupid with an animal and they end up getting attacked by that animal, it's on the kid. It's on the kid as well, really. But and sometimes it's a mix, really. If you have a dog with temperament, and you have kids that don't make good choices, you have to hold yourself responsible while holding the kid responsible for making the stupid choice.